Hey guys, welcome back to The Art of Craftsmanship. My name's Dustin, and today in the shop we are going to be restoring this old Stanley Bailey number 4 hand plane. Now this hand plane, the number 4, was the most widely used hand plane size. These you can find everywhere. I got this one from a yard sale for under $20. And they're just great hand planes. They're super versatile. You can use them for trimming off a little bit of wood on a door if you have a door that's sticking, if you need to, chamfer an edge of a piece of wood for a threshold into a room. Just lots of things that I would say any handyman could use this plane for. It's super versatile, super widely used, and you can find them all over the place. So this one's in pretty good order. There's no cracks in the handle and the wood, which is really nice. You want to look for, and it has the Stanley cap on it. And it has the brass adjustment knob, so it's got some nice qualities to it that I really like, but it's pretty rusty. The blade needs sharpening, all the brass needs cleaning up, so we're gonna go ahead and take everything apart, clean it all up, put it back together, and I'm gonna show you guys how to do it and how we can restore this back to its former glory. Usually your screw here on your cap is set to the right tension, so that way all you have to do is untension the cap and then it'll come off. We'll see if this one will. A little bit of rust, but not bad. I'll take that apart. This should come out by hand, but it's a little tight, so I'll figure that out. Not bad, okay. And this is just sitting in there. That I didn't have to take that screw out for this, but that's held together. So we have our actual blade attached to the chip breaker by just a thumb screw, which usually can just be tightened and loosened by hand. This one's a little rusty, but not too bad. Next part is the frog, and this is what holds your blade at the right angle. Just held on by 2 screws into the base. So we'll get them out. It's coming apart pretty nicely, which is good. The front handle is just held on by, you see, a brass nut, and this is a threaded rod, which we'll grab maybe a pair of vice grips to get that out. Yep. This is the adjuster knob. This can adjust your blade depth or how far in and out it's going out of the throat on the sole of your plane. And this is a nice one. Sometimes later models you'll find plastic ones or iron or aluminum. This one's an earlier one, so it's nice cast brass. I have everything now taken apart, and I know this great website, woodenshop.com. You can go, and there's a really nice page, how to identify your Stanley hand plane date. So I'm going to go ahead and go through each question now and narrow down what type this is and what date it was made. So first thing it's going to ask me is, how many patent dates do I see behind the hand plane frog? And there's nothing there. So I'm going to put 0. Goes on the next one. Now it asks me, do I see a raised ring surrounding the knob receiver? Which is here. I do see a raised ring, so yes. Next question is the plain bed painted dark blue? And it's not. The Japanning on it is black, so I'm going to say no. And it says, do I see a raised rib or toe on the front or the heel? And no, this does not have a raised toe, so no. And it comes out to Stanley Bailey Type 15 hand plane, and it is manufactured between 1931 and 1932. So it's great, super easy website, wooden shop. Go ahead, it'll walk you through the steps, and it'll tell you exactly when your plane was made and what type of it. First thing we're gonna do is just take all the pieces, all the brass and all the steel pieces, take them over to the wire wheel and clean them all up. So I have a rag that I just keep soaked in WD-40. I keep it in the tin. Usually I use this to clean up my axes after I use them and before I kind of oil them before I put them away. But this also works to help kind of loosen up the surface rust on anything as I'm using the wire wheel. So I'll just give it a wipe down and then go back over it, it'll clean it up a little bit more. I just spent about maybe 30 minutes, 40 minutes or so taking all this stuff to the wire wheel and getting all the rust off. There are chemicals that you can use and rust removers like Evaporust, and you can use vinegar and lots of different things you can use to just kind of dunk these and get all the rust off. But I kind of like, you know, taking pieces and actually doing it by hand using a wire wheel. I think, I don't know, it seems a little bit more intimate, a little bit more kind of one-on-one with each piece, making sure each piece is exactly how I want it. So that's why I do it that way. Again, like I said, there are some other ways to do it, which could go quicker, but now I have everything done. So I'm gonna go ahead and just take these last few pieces and kind of clean them up with just an old bandana and some WD-40 now to get all the dirt and stuff, grime off of the inside, little cracks of these. So I have a little bit of the chipping where this black paint, which is called Japanning, has come off. Most of it's there, which is pretty nice. Most of these old ones that I find has a lot more missing Japanning, but this is pretty good. There is some missing here and some missing in here, but I'm just making sure I clean off as much rust as I can, and I'll keep it oiled so it'll keep it from rusting more. The frog connects to the sole of the plane in two spots. It sits here and it sits here, so I want to make sure these pieces are nice and flat. So I'm just going to flatten these on some sandpaper on this stone that I have. Just making sure I get a nice clean connection. That's pretty good. I bet there's no movement at all, so that's a nice clean connection. Just using some water now just to clean up the dirt that's on the outside of these handles. This is the tote. Whoa, slippery. The tote and the knob. I'm just cleaning off any surface dirt. And these are, like I said, these are in pretty good condition, so I'm not really going to do any other surface cleaning with them. I'm not going to sand them. There's a few little spots of paint, and then there's an old Stanley Tools logo on here, which I think is pretty cool. So I'm just going to clean them up, and then I'll give them a light oiling to make sure any spots where there's missing varnish will not crack and dry. And then we'll get everything put back together so then I can have the full plane put back together before I start resurfacing the sole of the plane. I'm just using boiled linseed oil and just making sure I'm rubbing it in over the entire surface. Like I said, most of this is covered in a varnish, so it's not really going to take most of it, but especially at the bottom where it sits on the sole, it doesn't have any varnish there, so that'll keep that moisturized. Same thing with the other one. Just make sure we're getting the whole surface. That way if there are any cracks in the varnish, it'll soak into the wood. My next step is to surface and flatten the sole and also take care of the sides and everything. But to do that, I want to have my handles on and I want to have some weight to it. So I'm going to go ahead and put everything back together except for the chip breaker and the cap and the actual plane iron. But I'm going to get everything back together. Just put a little bit of oil on the threads here, so I'm just moving it back and forth just to make sure all the threads are nice and oiled. You can see it's just spinning up and down, which is really nice. This is the fine depth control for the blade. It's nice to have it moving nice and freely. So I want my edges of the sole, all the way around the edges, to be a little bit curved up, because as you're planing across the surface, you don't want these edges to catch on the wood that you need to cut off. So I'm just kind of putting a little bit of pressure on the outer edges here and here, and then I'll also do some pressure on the front edge and the back edge before I work on the sides. A little bit of pitting here, right on the corner near the throat, but it's below the surface, so it's not going to interfere with any of the surface. It's nice and flat across the top. And just some other, just little bits of surface rust, but again, I'm not super interested in making this perfectly clean and perfectly back to brand new. I just want to restore it so that way it's in good working order. With this plane blade, there's two sides to it. You have obviously your flat side, which is just the flat of the plane, which you also want to clean up. So I'm going to start off with just flattening the flat side of this. And I have 220 grit sandpaper and WD-40 as a lubricant. You can use any type of lubricant. Some people use like a window polish cleaning. I've used that before, simple green, different things. It's just nice to have some type of lubricant to be able to move the metal dust away from your actual blade. So I'm going to go ahead and start with 220, and I'll work my way up through finer grits of sandpaper, and then we'll flip it over and I'll show you how to put it into the honing guide that I have, and then we'll work on the actual bevel on the front. Now it's nice, this actually is pretty handy. It comes with the metric measurements for your different distances here to coincide with your angles, and on the box it has standard measurements as well. So it's pretty simple. You just set it out the right depth, run it flat on your surface, and you get a really consistent, really easy bevel along this edge. So we'll go ahead and move over to the flat plate and start working this bevel down and get it nice and sharp and clean. I'm going to start with 220 grit just to clean up the surface, and then I'll move up to 500, and then 1000, and then 1200 grit. Now there are lots of really nice stones that go up to the many thousands of grits and can be really, really nice and can put a really beautiful edge on it. But I found that, you know, for what I have and for what I do, this works really well. It puts a razor sharp edge on the blade and it cuts really well. So the last step is I'm going to bring out my leather and I'll strop both surfaces, the flat and the bevel. What you're doing basically is this leather has just enough texture and grit to polish this edge. I'm moving back, so find my bevel, pull up just a little bit so I know that I'm polishing that front edge and also the flat of the bevel. You want to do both sides. You lay it flat on the flat. And again, this is doing the same thing. It's actually pushing that little wire back and forth across the front edge of that bevel. And then by stropping it back and forth, maybe do 10 or 15 aside and switch back and forth, you're gonna take that little wire edge off, which leaves you with a perfectly clean edge, which is how you get a razor sharp edge. So this is beautifully sharpened up now, so now I'm just going to put the rest of the stuff back together. Got to put the chip breaker onto the iron, the plain iron, and then the cap and the cap screw, get everything back together, and then we'll test it out. So when you're setting your cap iron on detention, you want it to be, you want to hear, basically, you want this to click down on with tension. So right now there's no tension, so we're just going to tighten down on this a few turns, put it back in. So now it's to the point where we should start getting some tension, and still a little soft, so I'm going to bring this back up, turn it down another half turn. And let's see if that works. That might be a little bit too much. Back at about a quarter. Yep, and that's, so nice tension on it, so that's going to hold the blade in place. You don't want it super tight because you want to be able to make your fine adjustments with the adjustment knob here, which moves your blade in and out. I'm just making a few fine adjustments to make sure my blade is coming out of the throat, just the finest bit. We'll test it. All right. All right, guys, well, we finished up and this just turned out beautiful. I'm super excited to have this restored and back into really beautiful working action, which is what I love about these old hand tools, especially this number 4 Stanley hand plane. It's just a beautiful tool, and something that I just think everyone has a place for in their shop. It's a tool that's super versatile, and I think, you know, everyone should have one. And something like this where you restore it to a place where you just want to pick it up and you want to put your hands on it. And these old tools just have the history of lots of people's different hands on them, and I'm going to use this and cherish this for a lot of years to come. So we hope you enjoyed watching the video. If you did, give us a thumbs up and subscribe. Also, you can follow us on Instagram at The Art of Craftsmanship to see lots of other videos of things we're doing in the shop all the time. So another great way to support the channel, if you do like what you're seeing, is you can purchase the Art of Craftsmanship 2019 shirt. These are available now on Teespring, and the link is right below the video. So we hope you enjoyed watching, and we'll see you guys on the next one.